Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. And welcome to this session, Strength in Solidarity, Advancing Learning and Collaboration Amid Crisis. So this is a joint collaboration between the Learning and Development Working Group and the Advocacy Working Group of the Alliance for Child Protection and Humanitarian Action. My name is Elspeth, and I'm from the Alliance Secretariat team. And I'm delighted to be joined here today by my co-presenters, Elena Giannini and Marion Mwebi, co-leads of the Learning and Development Working Group, and Amanda Brydon, co-lead of the Advocacy Working Group. So I'd like to start just by providing a bit of context for this L&D, Learning and Development and Advocacy collaboration. So as we are all acutely aware, humanitarian funding is shrinking, just as needs are also rising. This is forcing really difficult decisions across the sector. So in many settings, we're seeing essential services for children being scaled back, being shut down, staffing reduced, and learning and development opportunities severely cut. And yet, despite these enormous challenges, child protection actors on the front lines of protecting children in crisis and conflict continue to demonstrate extraordinary resilience, creativity, and commitment. So, during this session today, we're going to explore a bit more about how practitioners are navigating this crisis, how they are sustaining, adapting, and even in some cases, reimagining learning, capacity strengthening, and collaboration with limited and reducing resources. However, at the same time, we recognize that while dedication and creativity are incredibly powerful, we still need ongoing investment in learning and development. So that's why today, during the session, we will also focus on how together we can strengthen our advocacy efforts to encourage sustained support in this area, because investing in learning is essential to ensuring effective protection for children in humanitarian settings. So looking ahead, you can see the overview of the session. Over the next hour, we'll begin with a brief overview of how funding cuts are affecting learning and development and capacity across the sector. We'll then hear a practical and quite frankly inspiring case study from Plan International in Bangladesh, followed by some reflections from our learning and development colleagues on adapting and driving learning moving forward. Then we'll shift into the advocacy gear, exploring how we can better influence decision makers and what are the key messages that we need to prioritize and protect investment in learning and development. So throughout the session, we'll also be inviting your experiences, ideas, and recommendations. So we have a few Mentimeters lined up for you. And please also feel free to ask any questions throughout. So just feel free to put your questions throughout the session in the chat box. We'll try and answer some as we move along, and there'll also be a bit of time at the end for Q&A. So before we move on, we also thought it's important to take a moment to reflect on the strength of this community. So we're here today as a global network of practitioners from community, local, national and international organizations, children and youth, united by a shared commitment to protecting children in crisis and continuously improving how we do this work together. Over the past decades, as you all know well, we've developed core tools like the Child Protection Minimum Standards, alongside a wide array of guidance across key technical areas. And crucially, these are paired with diverse learning and development opportunities online, in person, training of trainer, peer-led, and adapted to local context, all designed to strengthen the skills and capacities of practitioners across all levels. This commitment to learning is also central to driving necessary change, and in line with the theme of this year's annual meeting, shifting knowledge, resources, and leadership to local and national actors, while recognizing the agency of children and vital role of families, communities, and governments and broader child protection systems in keeping children safe. But the reality is that this collective capacity, built over many years, is under quite a bit of significant threat. So to illustrate this, Pedro, if we can move to the next slide, we just want to present some findings of a rapid data gathering exercise. So I know in the previous session, hot off the press, Amanda had shared the briefing note that we developed to accompany this. But basically, in March and April, we conducted a rapid data gathering exercise to capture a global picture of how funding cuts are impacting child protection. There will be a later session where we share some of the broader findings, but for now, we just want to zoom in on what this means for learning development and capacity. So if we move to the next slide, as you can see, as you know, child protection is primarily a service-based sector, and the services and supports that keep children protected rely on trained, supported child protection workforce. But as this graph shows, cuts are hitting exactly those areas that sustain quality services. So out of 250 responses, it's really worrying to see that this was only in March and April this year. So 70% of respondents reported reductions in frontline staff, for example, caseworkers. 62% reported cancelled or reduced capacity strengthening activities, opportunities, and over half reported cuts to technical advisors who provide crucial supervision, mentoring, and guidance. So to give some concrete examples, one organization had to cut 233 out of 522 child protection staff globally. Others are facing multiple rounds of cuts beyond these initial reductions. Frontline workers already stretched are being let go or left without adequate support. We're seeing in some cases technical advisors being reduced at all levels, roles being merged, for example, child protection technical advisors merging roles with education or GBV, absorbing child protection responsibilities or vice versa, or child protection technical advisors covering additional countries with increasingly overstretched teams within these countries. At a community level, we heard the situation is equally concerning. Cuts are affecting incentives for community-based child protection volunteers and community mobilizers, coming as well from effective communities that we work with. In places like Goma, Democratic Republic of the Congo, we heard from one of our key member organizations that this is having serious impacts on volunteers' well-being and livelihoods, and also the ability to reach the most vulnerable children in their communities. We also heard worryingly that this is undermining trust with communities and threatening the continuity and quality of care. And yet, in face of these challenges, we are also seeing examples of creativity and adaptation. And teams are finding ways to sustain learning capacity and support for their teams with a lot of enhanced collaboration across agencies despite shrinking resources. So I think with that, so now we've painted this rather bleak picture, I think we need to move on to something a bit more uplifting. So Pedro, if we could please play the video, which is from our colleague Shafia Faria from Plan International Bangladesh, who has a really practical example of how they are navigating these challenges on the ground in the Rohingya response. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Safia Khanum, Protection Specialist, Child Protection in Emergency at Plan International Bangladesh. Today, I want to talk about a critical issue that affecting more than 500,000 of children in Cox's Bazar and the impact of global funding cuts on Rohingya children. I also want to talk about how Plan International and other humanitarian actors are coping with this crisis. The refugee crisis, now in its 8th year, remains one of the world's largest and most protected refugee situations. Over 1 million refugee people have taken refuge in Bangladesh, and more than half of them are children facing daily threats, abduction, child labor, child marriage, growing cases of sexual violence, especially against girls. In the first quarter 2025 alone, the operation experienced nearly 400 serious security incidents. Unfortunately, the global funding cuts has worsened an already dire situation. The child protection system has lost their trained staffs, while some safe spaces has been closed down. The child protection caseworkers are overwhelmed, and a response to critical child protection cases has been delayed. Without much needed psychosocial support and safe environment, the children are left unprotected and exposed. But we are not standing still. At Plan International Bangladesh, we are adapting as we have to explore creative ways to cope with this crisis. Along with other humanitarian actors and support from child protection subsector, we have developed smart, resource-efficient strategies to continue protecting children under this constraint. Some of our key adaptation includes using offices and community spaces for training rather than costly venues, pooling resources with child protection agencies for co-facilitating trainings, offering short coaching sessions in the offices to upskill the remaining frontline workers, redistributing the team roles to make sure expertise is shared across the camp. We also deliberately monitoring the trained community volunteers to support in following up the low-risk cases and to provide basic psychosocial support. And most importantly, coordinating closely with government bodies like Ministry of Women and Children Affairs in all our trainings to promote long-term sustainability. A powerful example of pooling resources together in our recent 5 days interagency training or caring for child survivor of sexual abuse, a collaborative effort that includes organizations like BRAC, Save the Children, IRC, along others. We know the road ahead is tough, the resources are limited, but with innovation, intentional partnership, and community engagement, we can continue protecting the children even in the most challenging times. We are calling on all the governments, humanitarian actors, and donors to prioritize and fund for child protection programs. Child protection program is life-saving and a critical investment in humanitarian action. Lastly, every children deserves to be safe, to be heard, to have a chance for a better future. And with your continuous support, we will keep fighting for that future together. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think you all agree that it's a really great video. And I was trying to make a note of all of the different strategies that are being employed, and there are so many. So I have from offices and community spaces rather than expensive venues, pooling resources across agencies, upskilling, redistribution of roles, coordinating closely with authorities. And these are just a few. So thank you, Plan International colleagues, for sharing this video. So before we jump into the next section, we wanted to do our first Mentimeter of the session. And the question is, so building upon this video, it would be great to also hear from you. So the first question we have are, what strategies or actions have you seen or used to adapt to funding cuts in your organization or the sector to maintain child protection capacity? So you can also see the question on the screen. So just anything that you can think of, small, large, doesn't matter. It's all really important. So we'd love to hear from you. Okay. And just a reminder, the link for the Mentimeter is in the chat box, so you can find it in the chat function. And we have some answers coming in now. So volunteers for low-risk cases, integration with other sectors, exploring other funding sources that prioritize CP. Wow, staff and consultants working for free to finish up projects. It's incredible the adaptability of this community, despite everything and the commitment. Be more focused on local work, prioritize support around this, resource sharing, using AI, for example, for translation. Use of volunteers again. So volunteers has come up a few times. Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. So we've got some great answers there. Thank you so much. So please feel free to keep contributing. And now I'll hand over to Elena and Marion, and I think Marion up first for the next section of the session.
Thank you very much, Elspeth, and also for Shafia for highlighting all these key things. So briefly, I want to talk about why learning and development matter and some of the challenges that we have. As you have heard, in times of crisis and austerity, it may seem that learning and development is actually a luxury. No, it's not. Learning and development is a key enabler of quality programming. And without trained practitioners, we cannot deliver safe, effective, and contextually relevant interventions. Learning and development ensures that frontline staff, often working at the sub-national or national levels, whom we refer as frontline workers, really need this support. And they usually work under immense pressure, they work under immense pressure, and what learning and development does is to upskill them and build their confidence so that they can be able to respond to rapidly evolving emergencies, as we have heard from the case study. Investing in learning and development it's about localization in line with the theme of this year. This approach empowers the local actors with the much needed tools and knowledge that they need. Learning and development also fosters solidarity and collective resilience. By bringing people together, learning and development initiatives, as we have had, actually strengthens community bonds, shared purpose, and also mutual support for the frontline staff and all those who actually need this support. So as we have heard from the video, there are a lot of challenges. I can be able also to highlight some of them. For example, the recent funding cuts, which impacted greatly the learning and development budgets. As we have heard, most of the time learning and development is often seen as non-essential and deferrable. So this is the first go-to area to be able to cut on budgets. We have also heard that this funding cuts also reduces the ability to convene in person. And when we usually run surveys on the kind of support the frontline workers need, they usually need face-to-face training, including mentorship and coaching. And as we have heard, the impact has had a huge cut on travel and workshops to be able to convene in person. There is also loss of experienced trained facilitators, alongside limited time and energy for frontline staff. For example, if you have a meeting and then you are calling staff for training, due to the huge workload, they are not able to attend the learning and development due to huge workload. There is also digital fatigue due to resorting to online trainings. And most of the time, as we have even experienced this morning, there is usually network connectivity challenges, especially when we resort to remote support to the frontline workers. And lastly, what I wanted to highlight today is the diminished access to experts who are usually responsible for delivering coaching, supervision, and mentorship of the frontline staff. So as we have heard, with fewer global technical advisors on ground, frontline teams, they usually lose vital one-to-one guidance, showing problem solving, including reduction in quality assurance, as we even heard from the first session. And also there is widening gap, which also impact the practitioners, especially in this real time when they actually need this support. So briefly now, I want to pass to Elena to tell us now what is the way forward. What are some of the suggestions that how can we be able to cope? Over to you, Elena. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. Yes, I will dive in in the way forward on what can we do to face the current situation. And I feel like that a lot of the suggestions that Shafia has presented in her video are also featured in what I'm going to say. So this is a quick graph just to show some of the elements or the areas where we would be trying to work, or that we will be working with. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the first area in green in the graph that you're currently seeing is shifting to low-cost, high-impact approaches. Here we would need to capitalize on peer learning. And Elspeth emphasized the solidarity that there is within this community, and we really need to put it at use now. Knowledge exchanges and our amazing community of practice that has already reached more than 3,000 people, and that can really be a connector between practitioners on the ground. promoting localized training, so hosted in communities, so not using expensive venues, as Shafia was saying. And over the last 5 years, I mean, thanks to COVID, like to an extent, we have like made available a lot of content online on available learning platforms, which is asynchronous, and we really need to capitalize on this, as most of it is still very relevant and could be useful in future training. Next slides, please. So the next area for us to focus on in learning and development moving forward is for sure working across the sector, so strengthening our collaboration with the other sector. I've mentioned a few on the slide, like health, education, nutrition, but for sure food security and life wash, all of them, as to be able to have basic child protection knowledge and the capacity of referral. This would allow, at least like wherever child protection is at lower capacity, to have colleagues that are able to identify and refer child protection concerns appropriately. So we really need a push on this. Again, like the Alliance has already done quite a lot like of work on this, but we'll need to continue progressing on this. The next element of our way forward is cooperating with academic institutions. This is to promote the use of available Alliance learning resources, again, because a lot of them could be used like at national level within social service workforce type of curricula, or within disaster risk management curricula at university level, and this would like better prepare students that are coming out like from the university for to be operational in the humanitarian sector. Concurrently, we have realized that there is a lot that is being produced by the academia itself, and we are trying to cooperate, like as to be able to showcase some of these resources that a colleague of ours has defined hyperlocal, because they are built where they're needed, so they are truly localized. So we are hoping to have some events like with these academic institutions September, October, so stay tuned for that. And last but not least, like another important element of our way forward, next slide please, Pedro, when you can, would be the use of artificial intelligence as to be able to address gaps in coaching, learning, or technical support. There was a pilot that the Alliance had started that was interrupted like on this, so we hope like to be able to resume some of this work. But it can also be used like to personalize learning pathways and help sustain knowledge delivery despite reductions in human resource capacity. But concurrently, obviously, we need to ensure that AI is used in an ethical, inclusive, and context-appropriate way to avoid biases and misinformation. Now, this was what we had in mind. Following like the preparation of this session, there were other ideas that have come to mind, such as possibly like focusing on emphasizing the importance of training and ethical work with volunteers, on which the Alliance has done quite a lot of work. It seems like it's something that it's going to be used as a strategy by many organizations, as far as I can see from the comment that we received in the Menti earlier, but also the video from Shafia. So it sounds like that it's also going to be a trend. So we need perhaps like to also think a little bit more about that, Marion, which we hadn't originally included in our way forward suggestions. And I think it's very right. And this is the richness richness of this annual meeting because it brings new ideas and new suggestions for us, like, or it makes us reflect on what is going on, like, out there, and for us to adapt and respond accordingly. With this, I know I've added a bit, like, I'm hoping, like, I'm not, like, over time, and I think the floor is on to Amanda. Amanda, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. Kia ora everybody, hi again. I'm going to be speaking about some recommendations to donors that we can be making to ensure that we're prioritizing learning and development into humanitarian response. Thanks, Pedro. So I've got 5 recommendations here that I wanted to touch on. The first 3 we've got on the screen. 1, prioritizing learning and development as a cost-effective strategy, so to support reducing child protection risks. And that means ring-fencing funding for essential L&D within child protection allocations. And why? Well, we all know that well-trained child protection actors prevent and respond to child protection risks more efficiently, reducing long-term costs of harm and ensuring ethical and effective interventions. An example from a local context I know from talking to colleagues is that post-training, child protection staff have shown improved capacity in assessing cases and making accurate referrals. So what we've seen is reduced unnecessary or inappropriate referrals, saving time and ensuring that children are receiving the right support more quickly. Secondly, a recommendation for donors to invest in and scale up low-cost technical innovations. We know that digital learning enables broad access, rapid scaling, and also context-specific delivery. So it supports those of our staff that are working on the front line and possibly hard to reach areas, of course, where there is internet access. We've seen as well that using digital learning, training with Department of Social Services staff in one context, that they were more confident, more proactive, and utilizing child-centered approaches. So it really improves the overall child protection system and allows us to take that to scale. Thirdly, a recommendation to mandate learning and development in all humanitarian funding proposals. So we really want to see learning and development a standard protected line in child protection and multi-sectorial humanitarian budgets and donor requirements. And we know, I mean, saw from the video earlier as well, and in discussions, the impact we're having of the impact that the funding cuts are having on child protection, but really need to use our advocacy to emphasize and highlight how critical learning and development is, not just as a nice to have, but that essentially it's about reinforcing that program quality, ensuring accountability, and having that effective programming so that we're achieving the outcomes that we want to see for children. We know that trained child protection actors are more likely to follow standard operating procedures, best practices. It reduces the needs for repeated interventions, and we know it also minimizes long-term harm. So this in turn leads to lower costs associated with delayed or ineffective responses. So if we're looking at ways for cost-effective responses that are effective, then learning and development is going to be an essential part of that. Next slide, please. So the fourth recommendation that we think is going to be useful for advocating to donors is about aligning learning and development with national system strengthening and localization goals. So what does that look like? It's about integrating L&D into child protection system strengthening and localization strategies, supporting nationally led capacity strengthening plans as part of, grand bargaining localization commitments. We know that funding local capacity is vital, particularly as we're going to see reliance on international deployments decreasing with the funding cuts. And of course, learning and development supports that sustainable and context-specific responses as well. We've seen in our programs how ongoing training and engagement of child protection staff has helped shift from harmful community practices such as early marriage or corporal punishment by having these learning sessions that facilitate dialogue and behavior change. And so when you have trained facilitators, we're seeing in communities that they're adapting these alternative parenting practices and they're working to prioritize children's well-being. And so these are essential to ensuring that effective response and mitigating those risks to children in local and national contexts. And lastly, critical is about tracking and reporting on the impact of L&D on program quality. So getting that data for that evidence base and requiring in projects and proposals that fund the use of learning and development metrics and child protection quality indicators in the program design and evaluation. Because if we can demonstrate that link between training and better outcomes to donors, show that safer referrals, the stronger case management, it will justify that continued investment and it will inform how we can adapt to strengthen practices over time. We know in communities that trained volunteers have successfully mediated family disputes. They've identified early warning signs of violence, early warnings of child marriage, and work to prevent cases from escalating. And so the tracking and reporting on that progress because of training, we can continue to use that evidence base to justify the importance of learning and development with donors going forward as well. Now we've got another Menti question for you all. We're going to put that in the chat. And so what we're looking at to hear from you on is what actions that you would recommend we could be doing to ensure learning and development is prioritized by donors, by governments, by humanitarian decision makers. So really keen to hear what you think, to flesh out these ideas and recommendations, and that will inform conversations with donors going forward, and any briefings in the future the Alliance can put together, really championing L&D in humanitarian response going forward. So it'd be great to be hearing your thoughts, crowdsourcing your expertise, what you're seeing from the response as well, and why L&D is so critical. Cool, localization, excellent. Hopefully people are typing away and can access the Mentimeter. Maybe while we wait, I don't know if the others in the team have some thoughts, not to put you on the spot. Oh, great, we're seeing a few coming through. Yep, sharing with the Alliance how we have used learning and development resources available. That would be fantastic. Would love to hear from you. Messages on the importance of funding evidence-based learning. Excellent. Yeah, that integration and mainstreaming of sectors as well. I think that's going to be a really critical aspect going forward, and training on how to do that well is going to be critical. Oh, share some clear examples, tools for measuring impact. Excellent. These are great examples, thanks. Yep. Yeah, generating evidence between the L&D and results for children, I think, is critical as well, not just about what it means for staff, but how that translates into increased child protection for children. And how the quality, I think that quality piece is going to be really important going forward, particularly as we're losing so many expertise with the restructures going forward with organizations. Yeah, I really love that point about being courageous and presenting the current weaknesses, unused potential to donors as well. So really motivating them to fill the gap. and I guess sort of those lessons that have that critical reflection, what went well, what didn't go so well in trainings, and why, and what we're doing to improve that next time. I mean, there's so many trainings and people have so little time. Being able to make those as effective as possible, and ensuring that they improve quality and outcomes for children is going to be really critical going forward. Great, and evidence base. Excellent. Now I think we're quite we've got quite a lot of time, but we're going to be doing a Q&A, and that's another opportunity to be hearing from yourselves. There's a Q&A function in the chat, next to the chat along the bottom bar, that we'd love to hear your questions for us as well. Elspeth, do I hand back to you for this piece?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. You can hand back to me. I think we have quite a bit of time, so I think questions are absolutely wonderful. We'd love to hear questions. But if you also have some kind of examples or best practices or challenges that you would like to share, we also really welcome that too. So please feel free to ask questions and also share your experiences. This is the space to do that. So please put up your hand. And in the meantime, I have one question actually. I think this would be for Elena and Marion. So it'd be great to know if you could tell us a bit more about what the Alliance is planning to do in terms of L&D, given the current context. So it'd be great if you could shine a bit of light on that while others think of their questions and comments.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marion, feel free to jump in. We're trying to maintain, first and foremost, we're trying to maintain like our our learning offer on available learning platforms, as I was mentioning earlier. So all of our online training e-courses, such as the CPMS e-course, the child marriage course, but others and new ones which are upcoming, such as one on cash, which is gonna be released later this year, hopefully, are still out there, and it's quite a huge set of resources available in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Ukrainian and Polish. So there's quite a lot of resources out there. So we're trying to maintain those, and obviously seeking like opportunities to improve that offering, like that continues to be one of our priority. We have not deprioritized face-to-face learning. We still believe that face-to-face learning is a need like for practitioners, because there is no such richness like in exchange than face-to-face. So we're continuing to advocate like for opportunities of that kind. Funds are not quite there yet for these opportunities, but we certainly hope like that we will be able to overcome these challenges. We are cooperating with the International Association of the School of Social Services, and I hope I got the title right. Like colleagues will apologize me if not. As I was mentioning, academic institutions around the world are working on learning opportunities for social workers out there, and we are trying to explore what is out there and learn from what they've put out. So we hope to be able to feature these resources later in the year in some online events, which will be advertised through the usual Alliance channels. What else we are doing? Currently, Marion and I are basically trying to define our roadmap, and this type of exercises, such as this session, and the recently released strategic brief from the Alliance will be our guidance, and we're drafting our roadmap as to guide our future actions and to make it to be completely driven by the context and flexible, given that like we are yet to see how everything like will be unfolding in the second part of 2025. So these are my initial thoughts. I don't know, Marion, if there is anything like you would like to add to this.
No, you have covered most of the things, Elena, that we are currently doing together with the Learning and Development Working Group members. I would like to add also some few points. We have also been disseminating the Kaya learning packages to be able to help the frontline workers to be able to upskill them and be able to gain more knowledge and skills amidst the funding cuts, especially for learning and development related initiatives. There is also more focus on evidence. The question is, okay, give us evidence. As Elspeth had highlighted earlier, actually the key findings from the recent survey have really been helpful for me and Elena to be able to plan and be able to see what are the emerging trends and where do we have like the biggest country. We have also sampling, as you have heard earlier, during, for example, COVID, there is a lot of things that we learn. So even amidst this crisis, we are also learning. So we are also calling upon different humanitarian organizations are adapting, whether it's working or there are some challenges and some lessons to be learned. So that is part of the piece also that we are trying to consolidate to be able to strengthen our evidence and be able to continuously learn as a learning and development working group together with our members. Thank you, and over to you, Elena, or is
Thank you very much, Marion. I think we're losing you a little bit. The connection's a bit wobbly. I'm not sure if that's just for me or for others
No,
too.
it's for me too.
Oh, okay. Okay. But thank you ever so much. So I agree, the funding brief provided some good messaging or some good kind of snapshot of data for us to use to make the case. So I can see a couple of questions come in. One on advocacy, Amanda. I'm going to ask you if you could respond to this one. What specific global advocacy strategies can be designed to address funding challenges and ensure the protection and safety of children in vulnerable communities? And then a comment that this is, of course, the responsibility of the government, but they're not responding or giving a deaf ear for any issues raised in this regard.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really important question. And I think it does differ a bit across different contexts, depending on how much the governments are involved or how much the humanitarian response is filling a gap in the child protection system. But I think learning and development is important across the continuum of where different responses are at in terms of their child protection system and that safety in for children and communities. We've got a draft advocacy strategy in regards to the funding cuts in advocacy resource pack that has the overarching themes of how to protect children within the funding cuts. But maybe one thing we can take away as an advocacy working group is developing some more specific messages around the importance of L&D and preserving it in the face of the impacts of the funding challenges that we're going through. I'd also say there's, I think this is going to be critical for thinking about how we're building or supporting the building of child protection systems. And I know that there's work and initiatives about collaboration across organizations, like Save the Children, UNICEF, World Vision, about how to work more collaboratively to strengthen those child protection systems, of which the capacity strengthening of the social service workforce is going to be critical. And I know the Alliance is a core part of those conversations and how going to take that forward. But I think what we can also take away and think about is how that thinking can be shared more rapidly with colleagues who are working across contexts and in the field, so that we're all, singing from the same hymn sheet, or working collaboratively to be pushing that same message about ensuring L&D is a critical component of those strategies going forward, and that preservation of funding, and arming, maybe arming's the wrong word, enabling, giving our colleagues the tools to be able to champion that message to governments as well. Thanks. Elspeth.
Great, thank you so much. There's also a couple of interesting comments that have come in, and very much in line actually with the theme of this year's meeting, if we're talking about local expertise, strengthening the capacities of frontline workers. There's one specifically in the chat from Jana Abdel Jawadova, I hope I've got your name right, about looking into advocating to keep expertise instead of quick solutions of staff reduction alongside learning and development. So absolutely a very challenging balance given the current realities. I don't know if any of the panelists would like to speak to this question, or if Jana, you would like to come off mute and share a little bit more some detail behind this comment.
Well, Elspeth, I could quickly come in just as if Jana decides to jump in and to be able to contribute further. I think that's a critical element. Yes, L&D can continue to play a vital role, and it's absolutely important it doesn't get deprioritized, but it cannot be the answer to massive workloads and to that knowledge that someone builds over the years in working in a specific context and living in a specific context. So I do agree and share the concern that we need to continue investing in our human resources and retain as much as possible, but I know that fundings are limited. So agree that localized knowledge is priceless, and we hope that agencies will be able to see that. And I also hope that the funding crisis will peak and then will go off the peak into a better funding situation.
Can I come in?
Oh, yes, please do. It'd be great if you could just quickly introduce yourself and your organization as well. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Chapman. My name is Henry Bachira. I am a development and a humanitarian worker working in Uganda with the African Women Youth Action for Development. We are doing both. African Women and Youth Action for Development is a local national NGO being funded by UNHCR and ECHO to run child protection and gender-based violence interventions in refugee settlements in Uganda. We are the official child protection and GBV partners in Kampala and then in Nachivale, and we are also the chair of the localization agenda in the country. And to me, my take is I will not move away from other speakers on the role of learning and development. But to me, learning and development should be localized. We learn from the communities to integrate both the modern and the local initiatives to innovate localized learning and development that meets the current needs of children in the context that we are operating in. Two, quite often our funders dictate the nature of funding or the nature of proposal we must submit and the areas of concentration, and we neglect learning. So I also support the idea that every grant proposal we are writing, that element of learning and development should be integrated in the proposal so that the budget is very clear. But also on the same line of learning and development, I think I want us to adopt, I would wish that organizations adopt the learning agenda approach, where we continuously engage our partners that we work with to assess ourselves, to get feedback on how best we are doing this intervention. That feedback is crucial. And then lastly, integrate learning and development in the organizational human resource training plan. We don't need to tag it to the project. Every organization, irrespective of the project, has a training and organizational training work plan. So learning and development should be integrated in the wider or mainstream human resource development plan, training and development plan, so that not at any time, whether you have a project, whether you have no budget, the training should be ongoing. And then maybe to share experience, what we are using in Uganda, and in this case, in terms of learning and development, we are utilizing the service, the facilities or the skills and experiences of the international NGOs to come and build capacity and do the learning and development for our staff in the project. What I would also want to say that I have seen working is we are using the local structures, the local government structures, the existing government structures, so that in the aspect that we are no longer capable of intervening because of funding, then the mainstream national structures on child protection have got some skills to continue serving. I think those are the few comments I have. Thank you.
Elspeth, do you mind me coming in?
Please do, Elena. Thanks.
Thank you, Harry, because that's such a great set of comments he has just provided, and so spot on. I couldn't have wished for better prompts. So in terms of L&D needing to be localized, yes, absolutely. And, we don't pretend, at the Alliance, to produce L&D content that it's fit for every context and purpose. We are trying to propose some structures that you are able to adapt and use. And most of the time we have built these structures with the inputs of many colleagues from a variety of backgrounds. Plus, our emphasis continues to be on capacity strengthening and capacity sharing, which is mutual. So, on the one side, involving different actors, government, NGOs, local NGOs, volunteers, etc., so that you create that richness of exchange when it comes down to L&D. As for the other elements that you have brought up, these are quite structural challenges that learning and development has faced, even prior to these funding cuts, unfortunately. L&D not being systematized through the system of your organization, but rather be an ad hoc element that is added for that specific project because it has funding, not for that project because there isn't enough funding. So that's a little bit of what has happened in the past, or in some occasions, for L&D. So that's quite unfortunate, and we need to continue to advocate for that not to happen, so that our colleagues on the front line are able to do what they need to do and have the resources to do so appropriately. The other element that I wanted to comment on is, localized structures, like excellent, like if you can capitalize on those, that would be great. Henry, if you are, and this is like for those of you that are members, organizations, and are interested to hear more about L&D working group, please like reach out to us. We can put our email addresses in the chat for additional exchange. We're really always like very happy to hear and to get examples from the ground. Oh, not sure if Marion has something or Amanda to add, or Elspeth, over.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elena, and thank you ever so much, Henry, for sharing all of that rich experience and insights from Uganda. So just a couple of comments that we've received, I'll share, and then I think one final question that I will channel to Amanda. So just a comment, a couple of comments I've received. One is from, and I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Gregorio Spurge, saying that recognizing that learning and development is crucial, there's also an additional administrative burden that creates challenges for staff at the grassroots level, especially during emergencies. So it's flagged here that staff members are already managing significant tasks in their office. And now I'm assuming with the funding cuts and the stretched capacity, the administrative burden is actually even increasing. So although their organization, I'm not sure which organization you're from, so great if you could share. But although the organization are providing online capacity, building opportunities, they also need to ensure that they deliver quality training without overwhelming them with all of the extra responsibilities that the team are taking on. So really important comments there. And there was another comment as well in the Q&A. About the current movers towards localization. However, as starters, our greatest challenge is a lack of trust from donors to channel funds to new organizations in the humanitarian world, especially with organizations that have typically not been working before in a humanitarian response or humanitarian setting. So thank you ever so much for these really important reflections. So, and then the final question, I think we have a couple of minutes. Amanda, there was a question which is moving a bit away from the L&D, but very important for our advocacy, from Lynn Jackal, saying in CPHA, in Child Protection and Humanitarian Action, we are balancing between addressing life-saving issues and issues which are not defined as life-threatening. I work with child marriage and FGM in humanitarian settings, and these issues are often deprioritized. I am wondering to which extent there is a conversation about prioritization of certain issues over others due to the funding crisis. And how do we respond to this when we know how significantly issues such as child marriage are affecting and endangering children's well-being and life in the long term and the short term? So a very loaded question, but a really important question for the end of the session. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Elspeth, and thanks, Lynn, for the question. I think it's a brilliant one, and one that we're all trying to tackle and facing in the response. I guess a couple of quick thoughts before we finish. One is, I mean, obviously child marriage and FGM is tackling it is life-saving, but the conversations that we've had in the advocacy working group and more broadly in the sector, I think we really have to push back against this narrow definition and trend towards life-saving, because it's a false distinction, and it's being weaponized to try and narrow and push out issues like that aren't so popular or aren't seen as life-saving, when we know that they absolutely are. So I guess being champions for children's rights, champions for gender equality in these issues, and really continuing to push these messages, even when they are ones that might not be funded or prioritized, I think is going to be a key role in our advocacy work going forward. I think as well we can be really championing obligations under the centrality of protection and the role of HCTs in ensuring their obligations to meet that within humanitarian response, and seeing issues of child marriage and FGM and wider child protection issues as a cornerstone part of addressing centrality of protection, or as we say within the Alliance, the centrality of children and their protection. And we know that children make up 40% of the populations and humanitarian response. There's always going to be child protection needs. So really championing that technical expertise and that prioritization within the response, I think, is going to be key going forward as well. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I can see we're at time. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Amanda, to Elena, to Marion, to our colleagues at Plan for the video, and for all of those who have been here with us today and sharing your experiences and insights and really thought-provoking questions. So please do stay engaged with us through the advocacy working group, through the learning and development working group, and we look forward to our collaboration moving forward. I'm not sure if my colleagues at the Alliance team are going to share about the next sessions. So please do come in if someone wants to share or has a slide prepped. But I can tell you now that there is a networking session now for the next 30 minutes. So if you want to take part into some informal, fun networking, it will be in English. Please do stay for the next 30 minutes in this room, and we can have some fun networking together, which will be followed by a break before our grand opening ceremony, which will start at 1 p.m. Central European Summer Time. So thank you all.